reason why Muge was killed. Funny enough, even after, before he was laid to the ground, there's a cockerel that came and stood on his coffin. And we know that in politics, a cockerel stands for victory over a dark age during which citizens suffered. So this unusual appearance of the cockerel after the death was a foreshadowing of the coming new dawn in Kenya's political scene, as 2 years later, in 1992, the country transitioned to a multi-party system after 26 years of single-party rule under KANU. So Bishop Alexander Muge, his personality, his associations, the political factors were some of the things that led to his untimely death. Thank you.
Okay, mine is the chapter 5, Ouko Murder, Myths and Realities. So the chapter is simply asking whether Dr. Ouko's death was suicide, if he jumped, or was it an assassination, he was pushed. And this is basically dictated by the competing theories that have been put forward, but have still surrounded this murder, which is still unsolved, since a culprit has never been caught and indicted in court. So did Ouko jump or was he pushed? At the very basic, we can say that beneath this facade of nobility and ceremonial loyalty, raw power is maintained by violence. And just going to the theories that have been put forward, first there was the theory that it was suicide, but this has been dissuaded first by the forensic evidence that came out from the Troon report, stating that the way his body was found, burnt with a gunshot to the head, based on the forensic evidence, it was overwhelming that he did not jump to his death, he was actually pushed. But now other theories surrounding this, looking at it from his family relationships, his acquisition of the Koru farm stirred resentment among his siblings, and through research, we also saw that there were whispers that he was fathered outside the family, and this, his other siblings seeing that, noting that, looking at him as an illegitimate son, and yet someone who has prospered outside this family. So in a society where land is legacy and bloodline is destiny, Ouko's rise was both a triumph and a provocation for the family. The other theory comes from a basis of politics, especially to do with the Odinga dynasty. We talked about the molasses project in the morning, his growing popularity, not only in Kenya, but also internationally, especially after the Washington trip, which positioned him as a national figure who could transcend tribal lines. So that's the other theory. And so when we look at all this theory, the common thread emerges that Ouko was not simply a casualty of political rivalry, that he was also a symbol, a man whose blend of precision and his progressive ambition disrupted what we have been talking about since morning, this ornamental order. And combining with the rumors of his carefully managed love relationships, we could say that he was both admired and hated. So his assassination appears to have been orchestrated by a faction within the existing ethnic aristocracies of that time, specifically the Luo elites, whose ambition clashed with a deep-rooted Kalenjin-dominated power apparatus.
Thank you very much for that. And Dennis, where are you?
Thank you very much. When I was working on this chapter, I was at conflict with myself. This because I grew up and I was born in this neighborhood. And so where I was living, we're living next to Kule, who was Moi's friend. And so personally, I grew up seeing Moi coming with his own Volkswagen combo. And he will come, and sometimes he will have attars, and you know, and for us, we got used to this person who will dance when he comes along the streets, and we'll see him visiting Kule, visiting Degwa. And so personally, that's the man that I grew up knowing. And then here I am, I'm being pushed now to see him as a man of violence. And that became a bit of a strange, and I didn't do good in terms of trying to think him in that angle, because I grew up knowing that this is a man who I got to enjoy Mazoea Nyayo and all that. And so when you look at Moi's reign, you'll find that he was able to sustain his reign basically through violence. And he used violence, one, to be able to suppress voters, especially the areas where he was not very popular. Again, also he used violence also as a political tool to control some of the areas. And for me, I looked at it in around 4 waves there. And the first wave was in 1921 and 1922 on the return of multi-party politics. And here you'll find that there was this group who was supporting Moi, they were pushing for Majimbo. Yet there's this other group who were more focusing on the nationalistic structure of government. And so most of them thought that when they instigate some of this violence, they get to maintain their own control and ensure that Kano still maintains its political grasps and ensure that they don't end up being control of government. And so that became the first wave in terms of clashes that occurred, and many people were killed. Thereafter, you look like, for example, in where I think I started in October of 29, 1991, in a farm known as Mtetei. And in that place where you'll find that the conflict was basically pitting the Nandis, the Kalenjin, against the Kikuyus, the Kamba, and the Luo, and the Kisi, actually those who were seen as if they were pushing more towards multi-party politics, other than what Moi and his group wanted to push the issue of Majimbo and all that. And thereafter, we go again to what I call the Valley of Conflict again. And that was now in the period between 1993 and 1995. Again, we saw there was a recurrence of violence, and especially within the Rift Valley area. And you find that most people who were being, if I may say, chased or killed were from different tribes that were seen that they are not supporting Moi or supporting Kanu as a political party. And thereafter, we got to move to the third wave. In that was now in 1997 and 1998 within the general election. We saw that the violence moved away from just the Rift Valley now to other regions, the coastal region, whereby we saw there's a lot of killing again to especially those people trying to suppress votes, ensure that people don't turn out to go and vote, especially those who were anti-Moi and politicians who were more stronger but not aligned to Moi, to suppress them not to be voted. That's to ensure that Moi's people are able to be voted. And then now the other fourth wave came now, what we call now the end of an era. And now that's where now we found other, and the rise of Mungiki, who came now to start now protecting the votes for, especially for Uhuru Kenyatta against Kibaki. But one that when I was going through this, it resonates well with what is happening right now. The rise of goons, the rise of back then were Moi's some of the boys that were used, the hooligans that were used to push to suppress some of them, it's now beginning to come back again, even right now. And that's what we saw yesterday with some of the goons that pushed to be able to ensure that anybody who is not pro-government happens to be attacked. So it's the same strategy that Moi has been pushing for better part of his reign, to ensure that you get to suppress those who are not in line with your policy, in line with what you want, basically using violence as a tool to suppress them. And that's what, again, is happening right now. Thank you.
I think those are good summaries. Now, Mary, you see why I was talking about 2 minutes. Yeah. So eventually you get up getting your 20 minutes somehow. I think we can open the debate, the discussion around the question of these aristocracies and violence. Now, we said that when, just to put it in context for the discussion, when you look at the cover, we're talking about the victims of violence in both, and you can, behind that person you can have more. This is just an example, and the reason being is that the two were targets of very protracted legal cases and commissions and inquiries about how they met their violent deaths. Now, so in a sense, we are beginning to look at the death within this larger context of aristocracies, and how the empire itself defended itself against its critics, and later on the post-empire establishment, the post-colonial, would use the same. And this is what you find in Fanon, Frantz Fanon. This is what you find in many of these theorists, whether you're talking about Antonio Gramsci and how you are asserting hegemony. So how do you assert the hegemony within yourselves and between yourself and others? What is in my mind is the Mau Mau. The Mau Mau comes immediately. There is an attack on the Happy Valley, because it's the Mau Mau rebels within the Happy Valley who would trigger the Mau Mau. If you read Tabitha Kanogo, the squatter roots of the Mau Mau. So in other words, this is where things are starting. And the reaction is what you see and what now follows. 10 years of violence. But before that, there was now violence within the Settler community, the people. And you move on to look at, fast forward, the remnants of the heirs to the valley, the Chomodle, and the killing of the Maasai and so on, the Maasai herders. This is a case we have had here in our, which has been looked at from the Western perspective through the prisms of the Happy Valley and its legacy. For them, the legacy are the grandsons who are doing exactly what their fathers are doing. That's really the argument you get. So the question is, how do we contextualize this violence, which also applies to Jury Ward and Father Kaiser? That's why we didn't get deep to that line. Because the moment we are able to conceptualize this violence, then we are able also to put it in context. So let me stop there and possibly hear your comments about this. Thank you.
I would just want to look at the picture and kind of imagine how these two gentlemen met their deaths. I think one was killed by the lover of Lodero, was shot, from what I understand, by the husband of the wife he was messing around with. Ouko allegedly was killed by the state. So then the question that I'm asking, there is that convergence of the ladies in between. How is that captured? Or is it salient and left the imagination of the person who is reading the book itself?
Say something, bro. Yeah. Mine is just to ask the researchers to strengthen their report or their writing, because for Alexander Muge, there's a thesis, somebody did a master's thesis at Egerton University. I think there was an inquest or something about him, so you look at it. That story of the cockerel, you really have to find people, because there is a dispute as being additional story. So really, the family is still there. Find out even the church people who presided over the burial ceremony would give you credence, you know. For Robert Ouko, not much to say, but get to know that the State Department in the U.S. have rejected some chronological happenings. So you will be writing against a report by the United States that rejects the chronological of what happened. So reconcile that. Then Kaiser. I remember the FBI went to the place and gave a theory saying that because he fell like this, because his right leg was that way, he committed suicide. That report is by FBI. So please match that.
We need to connect between his death and the church as a whole activities upstream, because it didn't happen on a selected for himself. We looked at a situation where the Catholic Church, Bishop Mwana, there was Timothy Joya, there was Gitari, there was Sheikh Barala of Mombasa, and everyone of the Muslim community who are agitating for democratic space. It's only then Muge was coming from Left Valley, where would be looked as a disruptor within the comfort of Left Valley. Like when you would have people in Mount Kenya, when Uhuru presidency is there, or Kibaki, and you are disrupting. So I think that is why it was more pronounced. So I think we need to look there, because there was also a conversation. I think the minister was Koto Kondo. You remember that cartoon in the Nation newspaper with a long tongue, the loose tongue. I still remember the picture. So I think we need to ground it a bit upstream, so that doesn't look like a selected event. For Ouko, there have been a lot of stories about Ouko. So I don't know how you domicile with an authority. I don't know where we get the authority to domicile and say now it would have been the left triangle. Who says that? Who do you believe? It was political assassination. So I think it's an area that still up for discussion. casual imagination. But I think that is, and also, just like Professor Mwenja mentions, the picture need to draw a nexus. I think we need to draw a nexus with a photo on the top and what is inside, so that it flows. Because both of them, then the argument is then, from the picture, they both went through the gun because, or bullet, because of their other matters beside political, isn't it? Because they bring the issue of extramarital issues, both of them. If that's the nexus, then we may then draw the theory about the political aspect if we stay with what is prominent on the photo, so that we can draw the nexus of both. Otherwise, the other one was not in the political space, he was not in the US, he had no political ambition, there was no threat. So maybe we need to look at it.
I just think we need to be a little bit careful when dealing with this the Uko matter. I can understand Muge was very critical of government. Kaiser was also very critical of government. Uko to me appeared to have been a darling of government, very close to President Moi, in fact, a psychopath of President Moi. So, one can understand when murders are, when people are killed because of being critical of government. But this Uko one, I think we need to be a little bit more careful. And I don't know how you then relate to the aristocracy. I don't see. And if it is this things we're talking about, extramarital affairs and so on, I don't think it should come here.
Maybe let me let me make a small comment, just to throw some light to some of the things we have grappled with when dealing with these deaths. One is what I see as a big picture. The bigger picture where you find that Prof, I'm giving you an opportunity to finish. So let me continue with where I was. I was saying, let me mention just a few things we have grappled with in our own discussions, particularly in dealing with these matters, these deaths, sorry. One is what I see as a bigger picture, where you find, whether we are talking about the Kenyatta administration or the Moi ones, or the Moi one, the people who are critical to these regimes faced some level of danger. The danger increased if you were from the region or the community where the president came from. And I'm having the case of JM in mind, or even Muge in mind. Muge comes from what somebody can consider as Moi's backyard, and making the fire and burning things from within can really cause a lot of problems to individuals. That's one dimension. If you look at the death of JM, you look at the death of Muge, there is a class of its own, Biogama Pinto, who seems to have died because of either his socialist inclinations or because of his close relationship with Jaramogi and all that, as a warning to Jaramogi and all that. Then there is another smaller dimension where we have seen in our country, every time a senior government official dies or a politician,
there is always some explanation that revolved around somebody's private life. That was said of Ouko. It was even more common, actually, in some circles in the case of JM. I remember even when one of our colleagues, Dr. Mbai, died, there was mention in the grapevine about a few of these things. But how we brought in the idea of aristocracy, we were asking ourselves that when you look at during Moi's regime, there were competing political interests within Luo Nyanza that wanted to prove their loyalty, their closeness to Moi, where Ouko was one of them, where Oyugi came in as another one, where there are other guys like the Omamos and all that. But in the 90s, the center of power in Luo Nyanza in the Moi regime was actually Oyugi, the PS. Ouko, he was very eloquent, very smart, and a strong defender of Moi. In that way, in their loyalty, the competition between him and Oyugi was very, very strong. In fact, people we have talked with, they say Oyugi and Ouko were not seeing eye to eye because each of them was competing, to show Moi that he was more loyal than the other. Now, the American trip, where we are told things happened in such a way that Ouko was accused of upstaging, the president. The question we have asked ourselves is, did it provide an excuse for those competitors for influence within Luo Nyanza to eliminate Ouko? And therefore, can we characterize this as competition among ethnic aristocrats within the Luo community in Moi's regime, competing for influence, competing for leverage and patronage from the state that ended up having Ouko die? And then this thing of love triangle is brought in as an excuse, which is common. When JM died, they said he was having some things. Ouko, they said he was having some things. I guess probably when Kenneth Ombongi died today, they would say we saw him in a private place called Sidai in Karen, looking like he was not very innocent. That is where we were coming from. That there is a possibility that the competition between the Luo politicians for influence within the Moi establishment could have put or exposed Ouko. Could it have been the Kalenjin elites who thought Ouko was becoming too smart and a possible, probably successor of Moi within Kanu and other echelons of power, that he needed to die? We have not gotten answers yet. And that is why the idea of ethnic aristocracy and the competition for political influence and the attendant wealth and influence that come with it come in the case of these matters. I think
Moi would have done everything that needed to be done to pin to the person who killed Ouko, because there's no interest. This is my man. He's been killed. I don't know who has killed him. If that would be the theory, then Moi's behavior negates the theory. Because what was there for Moi to gain by not disclosing who has killed Ouko? Yet downstream, we know what it did to Moi's regime, the opposition and dislike and all that, because that is where it all started about losing, I think, that part of political base. My view.
Could there have been a conflict of relations, that he was close to Ouko And he was very close to Oyugi. So he let it has happened.
Remember, if you, Kanu, that is where the power led. And there was a Dr. Was it Oluwaringo? And there was the elephant, the Omamo, Kariech. Kanu, the power was not domiciled on the minister. The power was domiciled on the political structure. That is why our Kamodo would tell you tomorrow you'll be fired, and true to it, go and pack. So I think that is how the architecture of power then was looking. That's how it looked.
The situation in Luo Nyanza at the time was very interesting because the most powerful individual from Luo Nyanza at the time was not a politician, it was a bureaucrat, the PS. And anybody who tried to get closer to where Oyugi exercised his power normally was not treated very kindly by Oyugi himself.
Who? Oyugi.
Apart from having the power, which was low power,
Yes.
absolute.
So he was a cowboy without horses.
Yes, that's what you called, what do you call it? Something I'll recall. So the power domiciled on the party. And the party was Omamo, there was, who was that in charge of discipline? Okiki Omayo. Okiki Omayo would even, of course, he would, I'm told, old men, if someone, you have to go through a shop and buy diapers because it will learn. So, for Yugi, I would call him a cowboy without horses, but he had the power. But the people were with the political class. And that is what Moi would have wanted, because he's a politician. He has people who bring people to his base, than the technocrats who now will say shoot him.
Washington, the Washington issue with Biwott. And if indeed Biwott was involved, I think Moi could have been more afraid of getting rid of Biwott with everything that Biwott knew and sacrifice Ouko. The horse, the cowboy without horses, that's something else. But if indeed the Washington trip and all the differences were taking place, whatever happened at that time with the theory, for me it makes more sense. Because if indeed the Toto man did what he thought he needed to do, I don't see Moi throwing his man under the bus, and especially after he had done all the dirty work.
So we wanted to hear this, the kind of debate. That's exactly what we wanted to hear. Because we made this proposition at the beginning of our presentation, that the Happy Valley and the culture that emerged from there, and hence the legacy that would be passed on to the Kenyan post-colonial elite, are, among others, the use of violence. The ubiquitous use of violence in all relations was the case. Now, when you look at the four cases we are talking about here, we are talking about the case of Alexander Muge, harmless man of God. Apart from talking and agitating, he was not interested in a political seat, at least from what we know, and therefore was not a political threat to that extent. He was talking too much. Maybe he was an insider who should possibly have been doing it from inside the tent rather than from outside the tent. So he was outside. That's why perhaps he was dangerous. Then that's religious. The other one is now purely political person. Oko is a political man. Was a man of power. And again, we'll see the theories. Now from Oko we have Father Kaisa, again, just criticism, but biting, because he comes from a great nation, America, and therefore would be interpreted to mean that their views here. But somebody would be very careful to kill an American. So for that reason, again, we to find out what exactly happened. Then there's jury ward. The story does not end up because the person who takes her to the park, Australian, disappears, and so on. There are certain details there which, when you read the chapter that we have, don't seem to add up. But then when you begin to see the anger of the father and then the brother, and why they make their life mission to find out exactly who killed their father and their daughter. This young girl, an aristocrat herself with a lot of money and socializing with the big boys in town, or sons of the big men in town. So that's the context. So whether you are a priest, you are a politician, you are a tourist, or from presentation from Dennis, or you are a rebel, you come from a rival tribe, or communities that are considered a challenge to the system, violence is used along the way. And that's the connection we're talking about between the aristocracy of the Happy Valley and now that. And you can now push that theory beyond 202 and look at where we are now. You try to look for a logic as to why a police officer would want to shoot a person 4 feet from you using AK-47, which is a long-range gun, and therefore it's like you are killing an elephant. I don't understand. That's what you cannot understand. 2, you cannot understand why somebody would go for a young, innocuous man all the way from Homa Bay along the road 365 kilometers to Nairobi just because he did some tweets, which is a misdemeanor, right? It's a misdemeanor. And you cannot even put him in cell because this is not a criminal offense. You can only go to complain, as the person did, but not begin to operate as an officer at that senior level of dealing with a robber with violence, a terrorist, or other kind of a criminal. That can only talk about a legacy that is deeply embedded, and that is what is really provoking this kind of analysis. I know the urge is to go for the specificities. But with the case of Wauko, which is really going to occupy a major part in this discussion, and which we have been working with Mukami, there are more than 10 theories. And it is so sensitive because when the government pathologist went there, he gave one of the weirdest explanations as to why Ouko died. That Ouko shot himself, poured acid on himself, and put him in the light, and then lay to die, or was dead, whatever it is. It did not make sense, but did not wink when he was saying that. He did not even retract. And that is the story from the government pathologist. That tells you that from a government end, it was a dead end. They're not going anywhere. The Agukas and others, and Barack Baja, others who are explaining purely local things about their rivalries. He's not a son of this land. In fact, he's the oldest, but he's not our blood. He's a Kisi from some place. He's very related to the other Uko, which we hear in the marathons or wherever in the sports. A lot of the theories around there. Then you come to Watenga, the CID person of the time, who comes out with this narrative that, Ouko was picked and brought to State House Nakuru, where things went overboard, and he was shot by, Nicholas Biwott, and then moved. Now, if Biwott wanted to kill Ouko, it's not in State House. Really, it doesn't make sense. Like, that's the same explanation by the pathologist. So you don't kill people in State House. You look for somewhere else and do it. And Ouko was not armed, was not about to harm the president, so that that would happen. And even if that was the case, if Ouko was a threat to the president and somebody had to intervene, it is not what would have been the bodyguard, right? So in a sense, that also doesn't add up. And then you come to the issue of land. Ouko is buying land. His families and others are saying, and he had come that evening to transact land and buying that land. Why? Because he also has somebody else who had his children or a child, whatever it is, and Isabel is very angry with him. Very typical, according to some narratives of our brothers and sisters from Nyanza. You'd tolerate your co-wife or girlfriend or something like that. It doesn't get as violent as it gets in Mount Kenya. Or where you've got to get your husband coming to swear in public. Yeah, that I have only one wife. You have to, I have only one wife, and you are speaking because you don't. So it does get there to our case. But in this case, Isabel was not very comfortable with the other woman. And I think, according to this explanation, that's why she left Ouko there. Because you cannot buy land which you're going to give somebody else or something like that. That was basically one of the arguments. But the evidence from the Scotland Yard about where this is, the real theories that are in competition is the story by nation. The Nation Bureau in Nyanza, or in Western, the Nation Bureau, led by Kareb Atemi. And Kareb Atemi, I have interviewed him twice, and he has published recently on the same. So that theory that they both agree Ouko died in Koru. So that's it. He died in Koru. But who killed Ouko? It's very clear that he was gotten from the house by friends who happened to be members of the Ru aristocracy. The question is, are they the one who killed him, or they handed him over to somebody else who killed him? That's where the story is. So the Scotland Yard is about proving where he died, and they have proven beyond any reasonable doubt that that's where he died. Through now hard evidence, and I think we are going to put it, we have already started putting it in the book as the thing. But the question, therefore, remains as to why he was killed. Now, is it Moi? Incidentally, that evening when he was picked, he had an air ticket. This is according to one of the British authors who was helping the Scotland Yard, Martin Means. According to Martin Means, and he has shown them some of the videos and all that, it is interesting that Ouko had a ticket to go to Gambia to represent Moi in an event. Two, the idea that they disagreed in America, that was the motive, that is why he is being treated, and that the argument that he came with his own plane doesn't hold, because there is evidence they came together in the same plane, and actually Moi met him, and that is the evidence Mukami is bringing here from Andrew Morton. Andrew Morton is talking about how Moi shook the hand of Ouko and said, bye-bye, because he had asked for a leave to transact as a foreign minister. And if you have worked with a foreign minister like Wetangula and others, it's a very painful ministry to be in if you are to seek re-election, because you are completely out of touch with your people. You are moving up and down. So he asked for a leave for some time to go and transact his businesses and so on. Now, so between those theories, the answer will not become clear because we are not investigators. You're dealing with evidence that is coming to you. But you have to dispel beyond any reasonable doubt theories that do not add up. For example, that Biwott shot this person at State House in Nakuru. That this man was killed somewhere and then brought in a car to be dumped in Koru. Why would you want to move somebody from Nakuru in a car all the way up to his home just below there? That's the question. The fact that there's somebody who was after Ouko's life is not in doubt, because long before he died in Kolu, he had already survived an accident, a head-on with his car. So that one is not in doubt. But did he fall to the hand of the Kalenjin aristocracy, or did he fall to the hand of the Ruo aristocracy, or did he kill himself, as they say? This is the question. Those are the three questions that are asked. Yes, because now if it is the Ruo aristocracy, that's where you now come to all these theories about love triangles, the land dispute, his investigation of the corruption in Kisumu, because that was investigating in Kisumu town. Forget about the Morasses first. Even Kisumu, having lost the election in 1988, the Murolongo, according to people, and Moi basically rigging him in. This was the argument, and a lot of other enemies within his place, and so on. So then that's the line you would take. Then if it's a Kalenjin, you have to prove beyond any reasonable doubt that Moi had any reason to get rid of him. And this is the only person. If you read the account by Degwa, by Edward Mahiu, we are talking about now the hot information from the fire. Edward Mahiu. Apart from Ouko and Biwot, the next person in this, apart from Biwot, the next person to Moi was Ouko, and both would move together like Siamese twins. When they went to see the Thai king, not long after Ouko was killed, they were together, and Akina Mahehu and others were kicked out because they wanted just 1+2, and the only two could go are others. Remember, Moi traveled internationally, and the only person who was traveling with him was Ouko. So you have to prove why Moi would want to do that, or to even condone him to be killed in his house as he's watching. Again, these are issues we need to talk about. No, we have a story. The storyline is, of course, we already have a story that the legacy of the Happy Valley is violence, and that this violence is almost systemic. Now, about the Ouko, you cannot, because we are not investigating in that. But from analyzing those theories, you will get people closer to the truth, so that we stop this explication. And we dispel all the theories that don't make sense. Then we are left with the theory that makes sense. But you are also saying, whether it is political or non-political, violence was part and parcel of the Happy Valley. We've not yet. Not yet. But the parties, both of them, even Rodero, they are insinuation of political property. Well, the one of the killing of the State House by Kwatenga or the CID, that's completely out, because the state would want to kill him, but even the choice of where you're going to be killed is important. Yes, we will explain that. The other one we are dismissing is this one of the rough triangle. It's a free view, because the girl he's supposed to be taking is the, well, they say that he was a man of the fair ones, and as a man of the fair ones, then it is explained that way. Oyugi may have a reason, the younger wife. That's what's the theory. On the other, the Aguka is his wife, but his wife was a secretary to Ouko, so she has a job, and she has a job to do. But of course, there is that pulling of things. The one Eastern Bell is complaining about is a lover, and that's it. Now, it did not seem like he was really doing things, but the fact that story is coming in, and Rodero's story is the same, tells you about a culture. Because we're not really talking about the crime. We're not investigating crime. We are explaining the carry-on of the cultural, the continuity of a cultural heritage that for good or for bad seems to be affecting our society. And you can put another picture here, not only Ouko, many other pictures here to say the same, that we need to deal with this culture of violence. I think that's the point if we are making a recommendation, that we need to deal with this inherited, whether we need psychologists like him and others to help us overcome that trauma, but it is part of our problem. Thank you.
To be safe, there's something you said, and I think that is the operational definition of aristocracy. When you said, and it's coming from the thrust of the book, that it looks like you're borrowing the political culture of the happy family. If that lands in a continuum to the discussion, including Ouko, and then what it means now, you domicile it on the political culture that is it's embedding violence. Then when you go to try to break down what killed this man, well, we know that the thrust of the book is that you're saying, yes, this is how to look at Happy Valley, and this is what was borrowed on the political culture, and it transcends through Kenyatta, through Moi, and some of the key indicators of the violence as borrowed from there is Muge, it's Ouko, because at the end of the day is the violence and the culture that you are borrowing from where you are domiciling your thought and genesis of the project.
I mean, it's, you can summarize all this in a line if that's the way we wanted to do it. That this culture, that's in this, all the chapters we have dealt with, from Ouko to Father Kaisa to the Jury Ward and Ouko and Alexander Muge. You can summarize them in one sentence, say that this culture was riddled with violence. It was a violent culture which we have inherited. And then you can use the examples of today. But there are still these stories that really became, what you can call blotches in the conscience of the Moi state. They are indelibly intertwined with the state. And that's why Andrew Morton, coming all the way from the West, would take pain to explain how. But what appears from Andrew Morton is that he is whitewashing Moi alone. And at the same time, some missions, some commissions, or some of the debate in the public and legal circles are coming with evidence, very uninterrogated, that the person who killed this is Biwott, and Moi is not there. Then there is this story from CID that Moi was there, but it's Biwott who killed him. Then from this other side, it's Oyugi, and Hezekiah Oyugi dies a very miserable life, having served the government, just because he said he has evidence to go to give to the commission that was inquiring it, and he get cabbage, become cabbage. So there are still things to not to investigate, because it will be the opinion of the people. I'm saying there are two main sources that we must interrogate. One is the Trun report, because it went for the facts. The other one, from this perspective, is that the Trun, on the one hand, and then the Nation Bureau, because it's the one that broke the news and shaped discourse on what, or the narratives on how and why Ouko died. These are the only two areas. The rest, of course, come from the publications that have been done by Baja and other, all that which has gone into writing, which we have reviewed. But the conclusion is very clear. For good or for bad, justifiable or not, Ouko represents that culture of violence. It was there before him. with Pioga Mapinto, I think we have put that in the book, J.M. Kariuki, and others, and Tom Boyer, and others. So it's a culture of solving your problems or your differences through violence. And that's something we cannot avoid saying. But we do understand that as historians and political scientists, we have a moral obligation to basically try to eliminate the areas of debate. And I'm saying the nation versus the Troon Commission are the one. The inquiry is the platform where these narratives are challenging each other. And I am sure part of the reason why we thought PLO Lumumba should be with us is because I would have wished that he was here. I think the debate would have taken a different dimension because he was in some of the commissions that were dealing with this. That's it. Violence is part of the inheritance from the Happy Valley. And violence now would move in the Happy Valley from Rodero and other individuals to the Mau Mau. And in our case, it will move from Muge, Ouko, Juriward, and Kaisa now to the ethnic clashes in Muhoroni, in Mount Kenya, in Molo, and other places. And it was a sequel. That's almost predictable. What would I say today? Violence is now moving from Ojwang now to the gentleman who was shot yesterday and the abductions. And finally, yesterday we started seeing Jeshira Muse back. Violence against the masses. It's a trend. It's something we have inherited. And it seems to be inbuilt into our culture. That's it.
I was going through the chapter and I was seeing the definition that the author has given for political assassination. And if you juxtapose the case of Ouko and the case of Lord Aaron, then the question that emerges for me is whether you can characterize Ouko's murder as assassination. Because for one, if assassination is sending a political message, then why would we have Lord Aaron? If it was a murder, then it would make sense. So that is my view. What do you or the other have to say about that?
The small thing I wanted to add is, I mean, generally, if you look at the history of even beyond of what we are calling the Happy Valley, what you find in much of colonial Kenya is actually fairly a lot of extrajudicial, what we have come to call extrajudicial killings. You know, there are so many, for example, European settlers in Kenya who killed their African servants as more or less as a game. There's only one, I think in 1959, who was even sentenced to die for killing his African houseboy. But there are others, like Lord Grogan, the one I talked about, who was caning Africans as a game. You know, at any slightest provocation, he will cane the Africans thoroughly. If you look at what the British would call expeditions to silence the Africans to submission in the early colonial period, the British colonial state was basically what Lonsdale describes as a conquest state. Just conquers to control, to dominate, and marginalize. So if you look at that context, then the motive of violence actually runs across, even beyond the stories of the Happy Valley.
Thank you. So there's no closure to this issue of violence, particularly with the statement that Peter made. If you have got to make this connection between aristocracy and this murder, particularly of Ouko, you've got to really also work very hard. So we know this is one area that we have to work on and make it very tight. Again, that is part of the reason why we are here.
On
Yeah.
a lighter note.
Yeah.
No, on a lighter note, can I? I was just sharing with her. On lighter note, can I suggest a title? Sex, Money, and Violence: The Case of Happy Valley and the Emergence of the Kenyan Ethnic Aristocracies.
I just want to suggest that you give us time to really read this chapter so that we make informed. Otherwise,
But even if you read it, that one can guarantee you, it will not answer anything for now, or even expose new vistas of explanation, because it's still work in progress. I would say, up to the time when we are now deciding to go to do this zero. That's what I'm calling the zero draft. When we are going for the zero draft, Mukami and the team are still debating. This is actually the last thing we discussed within our inner team, and it took a while as well. And we explained now. Look at this, and so on. If I could address myself to Bogwa, then we move on to the next thing. So, hey, sorry. Are you complaining because we said the fair ones?
You know, this thing of saying goodbye, then you go to die. You know, you can debate on that one. What was the goodbye about? Anyway, I was looking at I was listening. I've not read. I've gone two sentences. The murder, which then inside there is assassination. You know, there are all kinds of words being used, but the person is dead. We need to pick one. Murder or assassination. Anyway, when you're looking at the Muge, other than what we all read in the newspapers and the rest of it, for us to see the self-preservation of these ethnic aristocrats, because that's what they are doing. They are just very uncomfortable with any critics. It's important to say, to give us a little bit of what it is that was making them uncomfortable, that really yearn to go. Okay? Like peeing from outside inside. I don't know what he was doing. So, and remember, he's a man of God. Moi is a man of God, so to say. But he cannot take this beating from this man of God. The issues around what it is that made them uncomfortable must come clear. Because for him to go, there must have been where he hit very hard. The raw nerves of the aristocracy. Now, as for the man of your cousin who has many girlfriends and many wives and many that, really, that's going to be a difficult thing to come out with. If they were truly friends and good with the Moi, how does it become that he must go? Again, do you want to have two competing, very close ones around yourself? Now, the issue of the ethnic violence, 1978 to 2002, again, that is neither here nor there. It's like we want to give this ethnic conflict to Moi. What are the issues? If we get the issues, then you start seeing why some communities will do, other than just saying there was. We know it was, but what are the issues? Because it just didn't happen. It's something that has been building over time. So what is this tipping point that will make it necessary that the system would use ethnic conflict to either get some mileage or even making a point that they are the people in charge? Okay? So again, tying the ethnic conflict or this ethnic violence to what our subject is. It is starting alone. We want to hear how it is tied to the bigger story. That thread that is missing. They're just starting there. Actually, initially I was about to start asking, so what? We already were very nice with our story until these deaths came. They're actually a disruption in the story. So, and the reason they are disruption is because the time that putting together the story and the bigger story is missing. They're just starting alone. Muge is here, he is dead. And then the man with the long tongue is gone. Kaisa preaches and does. What is it that he's doing that is making the system annoyed and comfortable? That really he has to go. Those things need to come out the much way we can so that we justify the death. And we tie it now with this ethnic aristocracy, which is whose other foundation is violence for their own keep.
That part. But the connection is very clear. It might not have come out clear for now, because as we say, this is work in progress. We have another. Yes. So that the tie we want to make is the following. And why the deaths are not a disruption to a narrative that was going on. One, we have dealt with the Kenyatta aristocracy in the years between 1978 and 1983. 1983 to 1988, we have tried to consolidate the aristocracy under Moi. You can see this, the things we've talked about, detentions and all that. So that is a period of constant. And this is when the Kenyas and other December 12 movement would come up now in resistance because of the hardening of the system. Then from 1988 to 1992 is the challenge by those who want to change the system. Now the pressure for pluralism, political pluralism, and the response of the regime is violence. So this is where it is coming in, that 1988 to 1992 is what we are talking about. And the violence comes in two parts. There is the violence that seems to be a kind of a deterrent violence, the Muge, possibly, perhaps the Ouko, perhaps, and so on. Then, after 1991, as you get to 1992, there is violence against communities, those that are perceived as oppositional communities, the Ruo, the Kikuyu, the Kisii, and the Ruya. And all of them, in their own different places, are also visited with violence at that time. And we begin now to see organization of violence as an instrument of power at this particular time. We are arguing with Ken here. You'll have the same pattern, almost the same pattern in the 1930s and 1940s, heading to the 50s. Violence against the individuals. She has talked about the violence of the Grogan against the Africans, which was a very well-established way of getting things done. But eventually, even around the same time, for other studies, those who have looked at the Kenyan history, you'll find that even violence against whites who had affairs with the Africans. If you had a girlfriend, but more so if a woman had a boyfriend who is black. This is when they would establish the hospitals in Taveta called the feeble-minded. So they start dealing with white, girlfriends of black boys, and so to say. Of course, the man dies, but because they cannot kill the white, she will go to Taita Taveta in that hospital called kind of a mental hospital, equivalent to what do you call this, Madare, equivalent to that. And the disease that would go there is called feeble-minded. And the feeble-minded would now end there because you cannot judge your sex partners very well. So you need to go there. Now, from that particular violence, then you head up to the Mau Mau and the violent rebellion against the system and equally violent response, which give birth to the concept of Britain's Gulag. Yeah, to the Britain's Gulag. So Stella. Oh yes. So Stella, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I would want to make two contributions. From reading the book and the brief, or how would I say? There is a break. And I want us not to be very defensive of the work that we have done so far. Sometimes I totally understand, but now us as outsiders are able to, or rather, we are able to see what we expect. So there seems to be that we need to talk about the violence, because it's from the ethnic aristocracy that the violence is born, or rather used as an instrument. It might sound like it's something shallow that we can summarize in 2 sentences, but a human being has something we call, from evolution, I think, a survival instinct to survive. Now, we are in a formal, or rather a civilized system or capitalism where we have to fight for resources that are very limited. So those are some of the reasons where something from psychology we call us against them. So if we discuss us against them, it will make sense today, tomorrow, and many years to come, because that will always remain. So in us and against them, we can be able to give an overview of how violence has been used because of this capitalism that has been brought. Because we're trying to look at it as Africans, were we this violence? Those societies where capitalism has really not set foot, do they fight to this extent so that we can now justify the ethnic aristocracies? So if we could discuss violence in that aspect and not really tie ourselves to these 4 high-profile murders that happened, because it will somehow push us or put us in a very tricky situation to get the truth, which is not an easy thing to do. So maybe we'll talk about the violence. It could have been Tom Boyer. It could have been JM Karaoke. It could have been the detentions of the academia during that time at Nyayo House. All those things were instruments of us against them to silence and now push the ethnic aristocracy, which will happen now, even in the current government, even when we are gone, it will still be us against them, so long as capitalism is there. That's my contribution, Asante. And maybe one more thing before we close. I understand Moi went to visit the Romanian president, if I'm not wrong. He's called, so yes, he's a very interesting character, and I'm impressed that we have mentioned him. At what point did he visit him? Because it's from there that he gets this indoctrination of extreme violence, because Nicholas is quite an interesting case from a psychology perspective. Thank you.
Violence as an instrument of political managing political affairs is not really inherited from this Happy Valley we're talking about. This has been a universal practice. J.F. Kennedy, we even had the UN Secretary General, what was he called, who was Dag Hammarskjöld. It's been everywhere. It's like a well-known instrument of political whatever. So, tying this thing just to the Happy Valley and saying it is one of the things the most important thing we inherited from colonialism and so on, I think is a bit challenging. And as my colleague has said, these chapters on these 3 individuals, I think 4, it creates a disconnect from the main argument of this this enterprise, this exercise. So I think give us time to read this thing properly. I think that is, if we leave it at that, we will be more useful to this project than making, yeah, we agree.
And we ourselves,
Yes.
for example, we have put together a lot of interventions in order to ensure that we have this on the ground. The question I wanted to ask
I
you.
just wanted to finish by saying, my sister there said, unless I didn't hear her properly, you are the originators of this document. Just listen to what you're saying. Don't attempt to defend, to justify. No.
No, I think to add on that, I mean the story coming all the way to the murders and all that, fantastic. But I think we need a transition that deals with the schisms between and among the aristocrats. Okay, and I think that's what we are looking at. The differences between what happened between Muge and Moi and this Robert Ouko with whoever. Those are schisms between players within the ethnic aristocracies. So I think that transition we probably need to be put within the introduction, so that as we transition from now the general observations about this is what happened between this year and this year, but within this context, there were these schisms that came within and among or between the players within aristocracies, and this is how it panned out to be. I think that will help quite a bit.
There seems to be a disconnect. Is that probably we may think of having, I don't know whether it's a chapter or whatever is it, about attempts to disruption. Because you're saying that this class, they're comfortable this way, but now there is an attempt for disruption, which now becomes the agitation. The Muges, the guitarists, now synopsis of that. Then downstream now, what did they do? Self-preservation. How? This now there is the days of Kaiser, Muge, and everything, so that now you can see the flow. That maybe in between someone tried to disrupt, and this is how, and the disruption looked like this way. And maybe now downstream, how they disrupt the class, disrupt itself, is by not only death, but others. Lastly, because we are also in Moi. Moi is not to have been very benevolent. Happy Valley also. That's where they have the word happy. Yeah, it was not only the violence, there was also happiness. No happiness on the valley. Now I'm going back to the Happy Valley. There's an element of happiness, but we have ignored, but we drove with violence. And Moi is not to have been very benevolent. So I think we need also to give him some flowers on part of benevolence, because it's also part of preservation. He did not only use violence, but also he used benevolence to preserve.
And Ivan is connected. Now we have to agree where this story starts. Is it from Moi? And if we go to Moi, as my sister said, I will be accused of wanting to give Moi everything that went wrong. Can we come from where Professor Wanyange said this is a practice that has happened universally? Then we come to Harvey Valley. Then we come to the War of Independence, Mau Mau. come to Kenyatta, come to Moi. We know what happened during Kibaki's time. There was 207 conflict. So, and again, in 1974, there was a conflict between the Nandis and the Luya, so we don't have to leave some of these conflicts that happened behind, so that we become comprehensive in this, and we will be pushing that story that will look.
I hear you. So we'll say that we have taken copious notes about this, and we continue to take copious notes, and we're also looking at the gaps. We want to look at the disruptors and also uniters in all ways. So let me then conclude this part by inviting Odigi, Masika, and my Ken to comment generally on. I know we were cautioned, and I agree with that, the use of the concept of democratization and the introduction of pluralism, the open system, rather than democratization, because democratization presupposes an agent, usually from outside, who is changing us. Yet, the quest for freedom, the quest, a participatory government has been us. That's all. It's all about us. So again, forget about the concept of democratization. But what we wanted from this part, and the collection of chapters around there, is to examine how the coming of the clamor for pluralism led to the disintegration of the Kalenjin aristocracy. And also, on the other hand, attempt to reconstruct it, to re-engineer that aristocracy, bring in new actors, inject old ones for the purpose of the survival of the regime. That's the whole purpose of that section. One, the response to the pressure for pluralism by the regime. One is to accept that we'll have the regime, the pluralism, but but pluralism should not sweep us from office. So how then do we survive within the pluralistic system? That basically means that we have to clean ourselves up. Therefore, there will be the clean ones, the whitewashed people, and the scapegoats as well. And then we have to understand the regime from that perspective. And therefore, that's why we didn't want to use the big word disintegration of the Kalenjin aristocracy, because it did not disintegrate. What it did is to re-engineer itself. And this is the period 1992 to 2002. Eventually, when we are talking about the March 18 meeting at Kasarani, where Kano pronounced itself as going to live for 100 years, right? And then restructured the hierarchy, as it were, giving each community a seat. Nyanza, Secretary General; Mount Kenya, one of the vice chairs, Uhuru Kenyatta; Eastern, another vice chair, Kalonzo Musyoka; Western, another vice chair, Musalia Mudavadi; Rift Valley, Moi is there as a maestro, but they also given the election, which is given to William Ruto, and the coast are given Katana Ngala as the chair. Again, that re-engineering of the system is part of survival. But what does it do to the Kalenjin aristocracy? The people who are the big boys, or considered the big boys of the system. Did it reinforce them, or did it deal with them? Again, that's the debate we want to have. We've been trying to have here. I'm summarizing our internal debates as we were going through this section. Masika, Justice, Daktari, could you basically spend 2 minutes? Remember, it's you sitting between us and our tea. So,
thank you, Prof. I was just looking at the 1992 elections, the triumph of the regime, before, as you've just said, the disintegration of the Kalenjin aristocracy and the engineering and making it broader, I think, after 1992 elections. So basically, it's about the success of Moi Kanu, if you want, in the 1992 elections. And the point is that from 82, we have the opposition that is on a rise, and eventually, of course, becomes something big and a major challenge to Moi and Kanu. But in the same breath, Moi then gets a way of, if you want, manipulating and infiltrating the opposition to his advantage. And somehow I think that helped him to survive in the 1992 elections. And then you have again the Cold War that basically ends in 1991. And then now there's focus on the regime from the former friends, if you want, of the regime. And it's a bit interesting that they now began to demand for reforms across, I think, the board. But in the same breath, they are very eager to sustain more in power, particularly the British, and they have a role in somehow in so ensuring that the opposition is split. And there's even a story that the British in particular had or went into some monkey business in the 1992 elections in also trying in, I think it's not that very clear, but stuffing ballot boxes in the High Commission right here in Nairobi. And then I also move on to the ethnic clashes from October, November 1991 in Mitete Farm, and then they spread across the country, but with an eye of the 1992 elections, basically to scatter, if you want, the perceived opposition vote, particularly in the Rift Valley. And I think they were able to suppress that vote, and I think at the end of the day, that works to the advantage of Kanu and President Moi. And then finally, I think from the pressure that was coming from the opposition, Moi basically rolled up kind of, you want, a revival of Kanu. He decided to travel around the country in a new strategy to revamp Kanu. He had started relatively open elections in the grassroots to get more stronger people in the party. And he also brought in people who had left and kind of was able to rehabilitate them. And then there was the outright use of, if you want, I don't know which word I can use, but some cold, if you want, strategies in the name of the likes of YK92, amongst many other pressure groups, where money was poured, if you want, and where people could be nominated by the opposition and then they were bought out, like maybe a month to the elections. So there was some dirty politics that went on in 1992 in the run-up to the elections, and eventually all that contributed in Moi surviving that scare with a very minor victory in that election. Thank you.
Thank you for that. David?
Thank you very much. This chapter is looking at Daniel Arap Moi and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Corporation from 1992 to 1994. The idea of cooperation is not new in Kenyan politics. If you look at the 1963 after independence and the destruction of Kadu, it's all about centered around the question of cooperation. And some scholars have argued that there's need to cooperate in politics. Such scholars include William Ganson, who attempted to argue and explain why do political parties cooperate. And he says that political cooperation is informed by two things: office seeking and desire for power. Office seeking and desire for power informs why political parties come together to cooperate. And another thing that influences those in power to seek competition is the minimalist winning position. Is that you go to an election and then they have very minimal seats that cannot enable them make a good decision in parliament, so they seek to bring on board people who are seeking offices, who are ready to seek offices, so and they are ready therefore to cooperate with them in order to enable the ruling class to sustain, or the aristocracy to sustain its position. and that this informed the move between Moi and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Corporation. If we look at the election of 1992, the KANU party wins, but it is a minimal winner because it got 34% and the opposition had 66%. So you realize that it could not influence positions in the parliament. Even the seats in parliament, KANU won, yes, but they did not have enough numbers to make them make a decision. And therefore, solid decision. And therefore, there was need for Moi to seek cooperation. And the ready person there was Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who, as Ganson says, might have been ready for office seeking or political position. And the main objective of political position is maximum benefits from the offices they hold. And therefore, Odinga was therefore ready to collaborate with Daniel Arap Moi. And Odinga makes a move by informing the politicians, particularly from the Luo Nyanza, that KANU is seeking to cooperate, that Ford Kenya is seeking to cooperate with KANU. And we start seeing politicians running around praising Odinga and saying that soon we might be in government, soon we might be in government. And within a very short time, Odinga gives a very emotional speech by saying that he has never desired to take the Luos to the opposition. And now that he feels that it's time to bring them to government, and that it is good to cooperate with KANU. And there is change of tone. Politicians are dispatched to Luo Nyanza to prepare the ground for Moi visit to Kisumu. And they do a lot of good groundwork, and that by the time Moi goes to visit Luo Nyanza, the streets of Kisumu are happy, chanting Jogo, Mzee, Karibu, Jogo, and now that manages. Moi brings Odinga very close. Now, again, we see change of tone. Odinga suddenly changes and starts praising Biwott. Says Biwott is a good man, he has initiated a lot of developments. If we go to Kerio Valley, in as much as he was challenged by Keino, the MP for Kerio, that show me one project here, then Odinga shifts and say, even building Yaya Center is a lot of development. And therefore we see a lot of rhetoric and praise around this place. And all this is, as these scholars say, office seeking, but then on the other side, self-preservation of the aristocracy. Moi is playing these games to bring Ford Kenya on board in order to sustain or to for self-sustenance. Now, we also talked about the impact of this. We see a lot of problems in the opposition now. When the Matiba camp and the Kibaki camp and the rest start making noise that, look here, Odinga is a betrayal, he has moved to government and therefore he's a traitor, and we see Martin Shikuku coming up and now relating to the first corporation, where he says that Odinga was very instrumental in destroying Kadu, and now he has come back again to destroy the modern opposition. We also see a lot of problems within the Kikuyu politicians, or the parties that are dominated by the Kikuyu. As the Kikuyu MPs start making a lot of noise saying, look here, now they start blaming Matiba and Kibaki, saying that if you people were united at the beginning, then we could not be taken to this level. And one of the outcome also is that Moi is accused of buying politicians to cross the floor. And therefore, we see that Ford Asili loses a seat, which makes it to lose the dominance in the opposition. And in as much as Afodasili is urging that there should be delay in formation of the shadow cabinet, Odinga moves because with the aid of Kano Corporation, he moves very fast and forms a shadow cabinet, and therefore locking Fodasili out of this. So generally, we're looking at the corporation, and we're saying corporation it's not starting today. It has always been there, particularly when the aristocracies feel threatened, and now they want to survive by co-opting parties that are ready to side with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we are really talking about the reorganization of the regime in order to survive the multi-party era. Yes, you have clinched the presidency in terms of the numbers. It is fast past the post. So it's not about absolute majority as we have today. Therefore, victory is victory. You're in power. But you don't have power. You can't exercise power. Because election is one thing, governing is another. So you have 100 seats, and you need 3/4 of seats to make a decision, the government. And this is where Moi now go to craft, a new order. And in crafting the new order, I think this is the discussion again we had, he had to reconfigure the concept of aristocracy. And this is the path of the so-called the Nilotic Alliance, the G-speaking coalition. And it's also the path of the concept of coalition, particularly the post-election coalition. Pre-election coalitions have always been there from time immemorial. It's part and parcel of the Kenyan politics. But post-election coalitions are a response to the inability of the winner to govern because they have not garnered the majority. And two, the threat that they can be impeached because the tool of impeachment has always been there in our constitution, whether it's the old Elizabethan constitution or the new, Kenyan constitution. So I wanted us to look at that, how because that's our strength. Our strength is not in narrating the events of the Moi era. It's how we tie them to the re-engineering of the system along the lines of this aristocracy. Because the survival of the Kalenjin aristocracy within that context will depend on how well they reconstruct themselves. And the consequence of that is that people like Biwott, people, even Arabto and others, now begin falling out. Because Arabto has to give way to Uhuru Kenyatta. Others have to give way to others. And then we start to see the not disintegration, but the engineering that also bring divisions within the system. Again, this is something we want to tighten up in terms of analysis as we go by. Then before we get to the comments, Dr. Ali.
Thank you, Prof. I want to speak to what we have entitled Ethnic Aristocracies and Class Politics, 1990s IPPG and the Moi transition. For the interest of time, friends, let me just say that when you look at generally the decade of the 90s, a number of things were happening politically in this country that opened the space for stiff competition to the Moi dominance of our political system. One, there was the reintroduction of multi-party politics. We reintroduced multi-party politics. And two, there were increased demands or internal pressure for reforms in order to make that environment of plural politics to begin working. Number three, I think for the first time in the political history of the country, there was, beginning to appear like class politics was taking root in the country, particularly led by quote unquote, the official opposition then was more or less the church and the civil society. They started mobilizing along, issues. This led to groups like the NCC, the National Convention, the Kivuta Kibwana institution. For the first time, there was a semblance of class politics in our country in the 90s. Now, with that came strong international pressure for Moi to increasingly open up the political marketplace for other players to come in. As we got closer to the 1997 elections, it was becoming very clear that despite the fact that Moi had narrowly won the 1992, 1997 was going to be tricky. So what did he do? With the elites around him, they opened up space for what appeared like they were ready for reforms. But in reality, what ended up happening is that it didn't change the fundamental structures of our politics, but reinforced the continuity of elite dominance in our politics. The means they used is actually what was called officially the inter-parties parliamentary group negotiations. What this group did resulted in four things, and I will highlight those and stop there. One, it led to the erosion of ethnic hegemony that had become very common. Not totally, but to some extent. The IPPG reforms marked the beginning of a gradual decline in the political dominance, particularly of the Kalenjin elite, who had long thrived under Moi's very centralized rule. Their grip on state power began to weaken as political space widened. This was very clear on how, for example, the IBC of the time, the Kenya Electoral Commission, was reconstituted with the input of different players within our political establishment. That's number one. Number two, there was a shift from command politics to what I see as negotiation politics. The reforms introduced a culture of negotiated politics, compelling previously dominant ethnic blocs, like the Kalenjin aristocracy, to engage with emerging, pluralistic forces, rather than relying solely on state patronage, as it was previously. And this is what opened up our political space for negotiated politics that has become a commonplace, actually, in our political practice in this country. We even wonder, why do we have elections anyway? Because after elections, we negotiate, we form one group, and we keep going, and we keep eating, in quotes. Number three, there was a decline of exclusive patronage network. By opening up the political arena, as it were, the IPPG reforms diluted the monopoly over state resources enjoyed by certain ethnic elites. The Kalenjin political class had to adjust from being privileged gatekeepers to competitive players. And for the first time, when you listen and read about the discourse among the Kalenjin elites, they, for the first time, started reimagining Kenya without Moi and started asking fundamental questions. What happens to us when Moi finally leaves? You'll find that a lot of it. And Moi had a lot of difficulties at the time to actually hold the Kalenjin elites together as their demands of beginning to reimagine what will become of them in the post-Moi era became common. And finally, there's a way in which the IPPG became a prelude to fairly strong multi-party contestation. The IPPG laid the ground for a more open, competitive political environment, which shifted the nation from executive-driven ethnic patronage to party-based negotiation, a transition that could eventually culminate in the 2002 political realignment that put a lot of blocks representing ethnic interests, but came in form of parties.
Well, that is good. Now, I would delay the discussion so that not get too cold, and then we come back, discuss and leave. Sorry, so we come and discuss and leave because we don't have much remaining. It's just one or two chapters. Again, which are very, very easy because they are tied to what we have already discussed, managing the multi-party era within the politics of aristocracy. How do you manage that? That's what they are related. So allow me to invite you for a cup of tea. It's us here. It's true that we can have. Yeah? Yes, that's what I'm saying. If the on our side, we can pick our cup of tea and then come and take it as we work, rather than we have smoothed around up there, walking up. So we've done our bit. So karibuni.
where the sun is dark. It's so fine, want to know where you are. Why keep me hiding where the sun is dark? The sun is dark. The sun is dark. Why keep me hiding where the sun is dark? It's so fine, want to know where you are. Why keep me hiding where the sun is dark? The sun is dark. The sun is dark. Why keep you hiding where the sun is dark? It's so fine, want to know where you are. Why keep you hiding where the sun is dark? The sun is dark. The sun is dark. Why keep you hiding where the sun is dark? Why keep you hiding where the sun is dark? Why keep you hiding where the sun is dark? It's so fine, want to know where you are. Why keep you hiding where the sun is dark?
Then what else we need to do? Sometime we were in a meeting. What is it? I raised my hand quickly and said the experience is so that we continue. We okay. We yeah. Come with your sweet cake to your table. It becomes more sweeter when you sit. The French leaf. Let's have tea and take our seats. Okay, I think we are set to go. What we want to do, we will do the remaining question. I mean, the remaining part of this exercise, and then I hope we had our comments and observations of the parts that we dealt with, that dealt with democratization and the inter-Kalenjin rivalries. We will finish the part now which we have entitled The Expansion and Fall of Aristocracies. The main thing in this part is that the political space in Kenya in the 90s seems to be expanding. And we are looking at the response to that kind of expansion of the political space. How did political elites, deploy their politics in such a ways that were in tandem with the concept that we are trying to develop? And we will start with Professor Kawanja, very briefly, Prof, telling us something about Raila the Gambit Accord and the discord in Kano. Very, very quickly, less than 2 minutes.
I'll be the hunter has become the hunted. What a situation. The first second. The Raila Gambit is simply that in 1997, Raila had a coalition with Kibaki and the opposition. The two had emerged as the top leadership of the opposition at that time, and they were really going for Moi. But 1997 was also very interesting because this is the time the ethnic power was tested to the core. In other words, if we put we put it in our own logic, every community wanted to be an autonomous ethnic aristocracy. So from Western Kenya, you get the leader, Wamarwa, standing, was Shikuku on the Kakamega axis of the Ruya. Raila was a candidate in the first time in Nyanza. Matiba was not a candidate. Kibaki was the only candidate now in Mount Kenya. Challenged here and there by Ngilu, but largely Ngilu was the candidate for Ukambani. And when you get the coast, they had their Wachuma and others. So every community tested itself in terms of its method to win the presidential election. What created this? That Moi was himself looking very weak because he had emerged with only 34%. Therefore, he looked vulnerable. And everybody imagined that they can bring him down. So it was a very interesting competition. When the results were out, obviously Moi was on top with an additional two points. He got 36 this time, not 34. But he did not overcome the main problem, which is you can't govern because you have not gotten enough parliamentary seats. And he looked, Kibaki was already in court petitioning it. Gilu was very angry with Moi. And the only person who looked like you can have a conversation with is Raila Odinga. And, Raila Odinga and Kibaki were to go out in public and announce that they are going to form a common coalition to challenge Moi's presidency. So Kibaki found himself alone. And at that point, then, the kind of the Nilotic alliance, as part of the reconstructing of the Kalenjin aristocracy that was there, was now brought back. But I think Raila argued for a stronger position rather than just being a client. He wanted real power. And for the first time in multi-party Kenya, we start seeing the cooptation of the opposition within government. That was the first time. He was given a couple of ministries, and the rest is history. Then came the March 18, 2002, move by Kanu to swallow NDP, that's Raila's party, and form what they were calling New Kanu. And to reform Kanu, particularly the top, and create more seats to allow more representation. The casualties were actually members of the Kalenjin group, because Moi is supposed to be exiting, but he is the chair. And at the lower level, they have to exit certain seats in order to give to other communities. That is a sword that cut both ways. It cut on one way to maintain Moi's power when he was in power. But it also meant diminished power for other actors. We saw for the first time the entire of the group that was loyal to Biwott was really kicked out. George Saitoti, remember, he lost his seat. Kamovo lost his seat, and many others. Most of the people who were around Biwott lost their seat. We see the rise of Ruto now as the key person, allied to Uhuru Kenyatta and Moi, that entire team, and he became the organizing secretary of election and the new person who was going to now execute the Moi agenda of, the election in 2002 that year. So in short, we're saying this is a period when attempts to reconstruct a larger, multi-ethnic aristocracy, by co-opting. In the British language, I think you would use the knighting, by knighting other people from other communities, so that you have a more broad-based, multi-ethnic coalitions with different peoples, different colors, the rainbow colors. This is the attempt that Moi was making. It backfired on him because the idea that at the core of this aristocracy is the Nairots. And the Nairots here are the Kalenjins and the Ruos in this particular case. And now appointing a Bantu or the other side as the heir to Moi, that did not go down well. And that aristocracy had to collapse. And at the same time, Moi had already purged or removed from the center of politics some of the people that were core to his aristocracy. Makto had to give way to Uhuru at some stage, if you remember. So quite a number of people. And when you get to the military and the other instruments of power, Moi had basically shifted his power from the main groups and left himself with the Pokot at that level. If the military chiefs were either Tugen or the Pokot. So it was really narrowing down to his home. And that's how he was able to co-opt the others. It was a game of bringing in and kicking out the rest of the Kalenjin, particularly the Kipsigis. If you remember the story of Kipkari Kones, in the morning you're a minister, in the afternoon you are not a minister, and so on and so forth. That was happening quite a lot. The fate of certain Kalenjin intellectuals like the former minister, Taita Towet and others, is still something that needs to be deeply investigated. Why they ended the way they ended. And therefore, it is normally seen like this is a problem of other communities versus the Kalenjin. But at this other time, intra-Kalenjin rivalry, particularly the gap widening between Moi and Biwott, that was itself very interesting. And Biwott beginning to feel even threatened. Not only that, other Kalenjin, key actors, beginning to feel threatened in that case. So in this particular chapter, the main thrust is to say that efforts to reconstruct the Kalenjin aristocracy to be more inclusive of other co-opted members itself did not work in the context of the 2002 election. Had it worked, then Moi would have won the 2002 election, and Kanu would have continued to govern, just like CCM in Tanzania. But in this particular case, the mathematics did not add up, and therefore the opposition ended up, getting there. But I think the other one is going to be discussed as the follow-up. So my point is that by 2002, Kanu was at its weakest because of that failure to hold for the aristocracy to hold together. Thank you.
Okay. Coming together of political parties and political interests as a response of the weakening ruling party. One other way that the ruling party responded to its weak position was through sparking some kind of chaos in different parts of the country, which brought a very interesting situation that I called a few months back, I think it's a year back, when I gave a paper that I had entitled The Unholy Trinity, where I was exploring the intersections of land, violence, and ethnic identity. We want to hear from one of us who dealt with that state of affairs, Dennis Monene, to talk about ethnic violence in Kenya. That one was presented. Okay, let's go then to the last one, the final fallout and Kano's defeat in 2002. Justus. Yeah, there is Justus Toothy, probably among the youngest among us, of the contributors of this. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm the last one to do the presentation, and as they say, the one who laughs last best. So I hope to laugh the best at the end of this presentation I'm making. My assignment on my chapter was on the final fallout, as Ken has mentioned, and Kano's defeat in 2002. And I will start by saying that out of the internal conflicts, bad leadership choices, and the changing political environment by then, that came after the multi-party democracy, the 1990s, I somehow saw this as the main cause of the Kano eventual demise. But besides that, it was a great setback for Kano when a number of leaders in large numbers defected as a result of some actions by President Moi and popular selection of Uhuru Kenyatta as his successor. This seems to be the trigger of the major split of Kano. And why is this? It's because there were some very close and very senior politicians and close allies of President Moi, people like the deputy president then, Saitoti, even Raila Odinga, who we are almost there to becoming the next heads of state. And therefore, the appointment of Uhuru Kenyatta as Moi's successor, I saw it as an attempt to create the Kalenjin Kikuyu aristocracy. And as I mentioned, it triggered the fallout in Kenya, of Kano. And recently, Lijiro sparked a lot of reactions online when he brought the story of Moi and how close he was to Moi, and tried to reveal some of the secrets he knew about Moi. And in his interview, he reveals that Moi intended to bring back the Jomo Kenyatta. It was like a way of paying back the Kenyatta family by appointing or immortalizing Kenyatta's legacy by bringing Uhuru Kenyatta into the game. And this is seen by how he worked very hard, making the young Kenyatta become a public figure, to a point of requesting or trying to woo Makto to step aside for him so that he could rise in the political arena. And moving forward, on March 18, 2002, the delegates conference that was held in Kasarani was another major event that widened the gap or widened the sprint, whereby we see a balance coming in between the Nilotes, the Bantus, and the Kalenjins, which is brought about by the nominations that we had done of the vice chairs and also the SG, which brought Odinga as the Secretary General of the New Kanu, and then the young Turks, Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, Katana Ngare, and Uhuru Kenyatta were brought on board as the vice chairman of Kanu. So out of this, It gave the courage in aristocracy a national outlook where all vice chairmen are seen to be Bantus, and the Secretary General now is brought on board as an Ilot. So the action of endorsing Kenyatta as a torchbearer, even where it was done, and even the time, is also very critical in this chapter, because it was done at during a Kapsukoni tour, that is Kapsukoni District Hospital in Mount Elgon. And Mount Elgon is a very sensitive area for the Sabaot. It's not a rad that, it's not a rad like any other. And therefore, Moi, either deliberately, may have decided to unveil the torchbearer at these grounds. So this action brought about the split. We can see people like Raila Odinga moving from the partnership or from the coalition, and also the split of Ford to Ford Asiri. This is where we see Kenneth Matiba and also Mwai Kibaki for DP. Now they merge with other like-minded, like Charity Ngiru, Kijana wa Marwa, and they form a coalition that is later seen to be a threat to the ruling party KANU. The coalition is NAK, but in October then, LDP teams up with KANU, and then now they form not the KANU, sorry, LDP and NAK, they team up, they form the NAC, NARC, and brings about Kibaki as the presidential candidate. And this is now the match between Kibaki and Uhuru, which is a coalition fighting against Moi. And the defeat of Uhuru Kenyatta by President Kibaki somehow marked the end of KANU, because since then, KANU can only be seen or can only be remembered for victories achieved then. But currently, it is just a political party by name, but not that influential. Then lastly, how did the demise of Moi and Kenyatta ethnic aristocracy come to be? Or what was the effect of this? There was a lot of tension, political tension, as Dr. Ken has mentioned. As Moi is coming out of office, or his tenure is coming to an end, the political tensions are now rising, and the temperatures are high, which I somehow tend to believe were seen in the 2007-2008, which can be attributed to the departure of Moi and his desire to retain power or influence the political arena. And the last thing I think that marks the end of KANU is when Moi leaves with the military chopper and waving to the crowd to his Kabarak home. That's the last sentence in my chapter. Yeah, I think that's summary.
Thank you. Thank you. Friends, I think we'll have quick comments. I want us to go a bit systematically, beginning with Dr. Gashir, and then we go like this. I'll give you this.
For this one, we are speaking from the chapter on the intra-Karajan libraries, and these two. Well, I've listened to both presentations, and they are well put through. Well, we had a sidebar with Prof, here, and we agreed on one thing, that we need to see the flow. I think we need to see the flow, and also there was also consensus. Sometimes we are mixing the concept of the class we're speaking to and the political aspect of those two. So we need to, I think, win off the political, though they are connected, so that we stay on our theorem. Because our theorem is that we are moving from Happy Valley, adopted the culture of violence and what it is, and we go all the way. But along the way, I think we are branching off to the political aspect. For example, with the fall of Kanu, does it mean that Kanu was synonymous with the concept? So when Kanu fell, is it the same time we can also say also the class fell? I think that is only my the area that we need to arrange.
Prof.
Let me first of all ask, whom are you targeting in this publication? General readership or the academic? That is important in relation to what my brother here is saying, and we are ready to discuss with him. I think clarity of concepts is important if you want to understand the story. At the moment, there is a bit of confusion. Whether you are associating aristocrats with the political elite or aristocrats and the regime. So sometimes I hear talking about survival of the aristocrats. And at another time, people talk about the survival of the regime. I think we need to make that those concepts clear, and if there is a connection between them, also make it clear. Once that is done, I think the rest of the things will get yes.
Who is in tourism, but we will talk about that.
The only so, thank you, presenters. The person who presented, Dennis Munena, kindly refer to an article by Wafula Okumu on the militias. They are always there for hire, all the time. So what you saw yesterday is they are always around, and you must have heard one saying, to now operate up to what we are doing. So it's a long story. Chingororo in Kisii and so many. Yes. Yes. Then when Kanu was defeated, does it mean that Moi was defeated? In 2002. What is that story or sentence? He said, Kanu will rule for 100 years. Is it true? Those people who are in Kanu are still there. Maybe he was right at some point. His political babies are still there. Yeah, and yeah. Lastly, when Moi declared Uhuru to be the presidential candidate, I don't know how the newspapers put it in Mount Elgon. It was in Eldoret State Lodge because I was there. Raburu, the PC, many. It was a small group, but the story went that it was Mount Elgon. I think the Mount Elgon people wanted to show that his prominence of politics. Anyway, it can mean anything. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I missed the discussion. The two last ones, yes. And this is how I see the flow. If you look at 1 through 4, as my brother here was talking, I was just thinking about how this can flow. As you look at 1 through 4, that is the foundation of the formation of these ethnic aristocracies. And that is coming now. That's the generation that came from the colonialism, and then the founding fathers now from Kenyatta now coming on to Moi. That's what I'm seeing in number 1 through 4. Then the second session, this one on top here on this side, that's a schism between and among the players within the aristocratic class. Then when you come to the next one, that's what Dr. Gashi was trying to say, that's the disruption of the continuation of the aristocracies that started to happen with the 1992, the multi-party. That disruption disrupted the flow that was there from the formations to the schisms, now with the disruption. Then when you come to the last one, the one that we just did, that's a fall or the starting of the falling of the founding aristocracies within the ruling elite in the country. And I think if in your introduction, if you're able to have it flow that way, you have the British influence into the formation of the aristocratic class of our political elite. Then from there you have the schism between themselves, and therefore they're killing each other. And that's why you don't forget to mention the JM Karaoke Manders and Tom Mboya in the previous regime that formed the basis for the psyche that Moi took over and started the Nyayo thing. And from there, they started fighting among themselves, and they're killing each other. Then from there is the disruption, the multi-partism that came. Then from there is the starting of the falling of those aristocratic families. The problem I have with where we are now is the same players who've been there for 30, 40, 50 years. Those families are still there, and they're still controlling the political speech and the political pace in this country. The Wamalwas, the Mudavadis, the Odingas, the Kenyattas, they're still there. And I think as you close, probably you'll be feeding us forward into what do we expect now in the next generation. That's the 202 generation are moving forward. And how do we move away from these aristocratic families that pretty much inherited what they have from the British and without having to work for too hard. Remember the Mau Maus were left out. The people you're talking about here are the collaborators who collaborate with the British. And those are, and I think if you have that flow, it might start now to make sense on where you are coming to the conclusion.
Wow. This page 230 with the demise of Moi and Kenyatta. So sudden. Okay? I was not prepared for that one. Okay? So the story building to there. It's a bit of it. And I think that this last bit is so much of, is it newspaper? I'm not hearing the throws the of this demise. It's just a nice game. Yeah, there was this one, and then Sally loses her shoe, and it is. But the last sentence is that one will make us be killed completely. Moi retired after 24 years service. Moi had served for very many years. It's not 24. It cannot be. he was still serving. So I've been listening to all of us, and I think, like any other beginning, we have a very good draft from which we can enrich it. My friend Peter is, we need to read it so that we, you people, you're already in it. That's why you can't even keep it quiet. You're already there. So we need you give us some time to read so that we are all at the same level, and of course do our own notes so that when we meet again, if we shall, then it will be a richer document. Like I said, it's okay to fix this. If you are talking from nowhere, you will not have been discussing up to this time. So at least you have a document from which you can work. And as always, it's important that our sources of information, because that is where I start like an academician, like a historian. The moment I don't see where the information is coming from, I start now having doubts whether it is our thoughts or something like that. So for all the other papers that we have, the sources now need to come a little clearer and many more, so that you don't tell us that you have already, what did you say? You have already done interviews. So we don't know whether the interviews are part of this or they will come again later. So that as we improve, even before we can even meet, those who have paper present, start now making your paper richer. So that when we meet next time, even when I say I don't see sources here, you tell me you have. We move on like that. So it is work in progress. We are happy, and I'm very happy that I'm part of this progress. And that takes me back to Kenyan history, or 201 and 203. Yes, and it's good. I don't know whether we have, we write books many times without anything, a picture or something else. We have that can make this thing not just readable, but also visually nice, and anybody who is not a historian or political scientist can want to pick the book and just want to go through it. Yeah, so if we could, as we are going on, start looking for those things as we move on. Otherwise, it's a good start, and we are going to support with what we have. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Catherine? No, you can say hi to us. No, at least now, finally, in the evening. Yeah, there is a... Thank you.
No, I think it's a good topic. And like I was saying at lunchtime, it gives a lot of reflection that succession is not accidental. Everything is planned. You're out there, you think it's just happening, but there's someone who wants Moi to become the president vis-a-vis someone else. There's someone who has determined Kenyatta will become the president, and that person, unfortunately, may not be me or a Kenya. It could be some forces out there. Yeah.
Good. No, things don't happen for nothing. Yeah. Any other person who has a comment? We have not heard your voice. You want to add something, please? Let's give me a privilege of hearing you.
Yeah. So I think Prof said it at the beginning that I come from the sciences, but in terms of universal application of principles, I think I can also make some contribution to this. Also because part of the history I began to exist and to understand what is happening. So if you give us time to read, I will also make my written submissions. But what I see when we went from the first chapter to the last is that aristocracies also change in the way they are formed and how they are constituted. Now, what I'm getting from this discussion is we are thinking that that only happens, as you said, for them to survive or to preserve themselves. But we also need to ask ourselves, what was happening in context that influenced them to change the way they do things, or to use violence, or to change how they are formed? You know, the way you say Kalenjin Luo, the Nilots, then it becomes Kalenjin Kikuyu. So what apart from their desire to survive, was there other things that were happening in context that was influencing that? So when we look at that point where we came and discussed the multi-party, I am thinking that there was also the emergence of external opposition. So politically, when we opened the democratic space in Kenya, there were foreign agencies that saw an opportunity to also come and interfere into Kenyan politics by providing resources, and there then we start seeing the emergence of a vibrant civil society in Kenya. So I was thinking that is what I'll think about, or we can think about, is this emergence of the Kenyan civil society through external interference in Kenyan politics also might it have influenced how the thinking and how these aristocrats were thinking at that time, and would it have contributed to the imminent fall of the Kalenjin Luo aristocracy, as it were? So, but mainly I'll just make my written contributions and give it to you.
Thank you very much. We will have take the microphone to Dr. Justus Ondigi. You have 1 second to say something about, you're one of the authors. You have heard what our guests have said. What say you?
Well, I think I'm happy for the comments that have come through. But again, as Prof. Wanyande has indicated, that they have to read for them to make an enriched kind of recommendations to the papers. So we'll be looking out for those insights so that the book can be enriched much further. So we will be waiting for those comments and recommendations and insights.
Thank you. Dr. Masika.
Thank you very much. There's a lot that has been said. We've taken notes, and it's very enriching. I liked what a professor said. It captured my eye, that the longevity of aristocracy is destroying this country. That's a quote I'm taking home. And it's very, very enriching. We will factor in what all of you have said. You have opened us. We have opened our thinking. Daktari, the Kidomi concept in creating and strengthening the aristocracy, the Maziwa ya Nyayo. Some will see it as just drinking milk. Moi wants children to go to school, and its role in strengthening the aristocracy. We're going to factor in all that to enrich the book, and we're very grateful. Thank you for this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Take to Justus. Justus, and just give us your parting shot, please, in response to what our guests are saying.
Okay, thank you. I think my take home, even as I go and review my chapter, even as we synchronize the book, is that the issue of the audience, and especially the young generation, we need to bring something that will make it attractive also to them, because they need to know these things so that we can pass the information to them. Okay.
Yes, Mokami.
Mine is just to say, at the beginning, we were told that as academics, every day is a learning day. And I think I've learned a lot today, especially from the professors and doctors who have presented today to us, and I think the work will be richer with the responses and comments, especially on that chapter of Ouko, the length that we have spent looking at it. I'm looking forward to your comments and responses. Thank you.
Yes, Stella. Nikki.
Mine is not to belabor the point that indeed there is a lot is written and that we'll definitely take into consideration. And I want to take this opportunity to say thank you very much to our guests, the professors, the doctors, who have been gracious enough to take time of their day to guide us. So we are very excited about the contributions and we'll definitely factor them in. And I'm also grateful to be here as a Gen Z, to be amongst the great people, the great men and women over here. So thank you very much. Yes, I am.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues. Let me just say this before I hand over the microphone to Prof here to make closing remarks. One, I grew up through much of my life really listening and singing Kawala Kenya, Kawala. I thought you would respond. Rising more. That tells me that's it. That's it. We sang this in both our national language, and also there are songs we sang in our own language. I remember I sang for Moi when I was a young boy during the Kisi agricultural show. Monto Gontebia yo mogambio Kenya wa bonte biribuya. Monto Gontebia yo mogambio Kenya wa bonte biribuya. Biribuya baba bingo ya bora baba komogolera. Somebody will translate that, but it simply means more or less the same thing of Tawara Kenya, but just says whoever is telling me about Moi, the president of Kenya, has told me something sweet. I hope just as I've done that translation correctly. Okay. I'm singing this in answer to what Dr. Kurugat was saying. The defeat of Kanu did not necessarily mean the end of Moi. I actually see Moi in power during Kenyatta's time. That's Kenyatta 2. Now it's even more evident. You see clearly, those of us who lived through. So wherever he is, mzee anafanya rungu kwa grave hivi. Wherever he is. So those are the things we need to grapple with, probably, Dr. Kurugat, the continuities and discontinuities in some of the things that we are discussing, and takes me to the idea of Arnold Toynbee, of the secular nature of historical disposition in our midst. Secondly, friends, I hope this is the last time I will be talking, so let me say everything. We say in my language that a problem shared is a problem solved. We have shared this problem. We have interacted with this material, but we are not able to see what the problem is in it. So you have helped us to see things in fairly new perspectives, because as Machiavelli says, the best way to see the beauty of the valley is to go to the mountain and look down. Or the best way to see the beauty of the mountain is to go down the valley and look up. So you are actually looking at us from a distance, and I don't want to imagine what is going on in your head. What are these idiots saying? But what you have told us really will help us to revise this book, and this is in tandem with the African, sage knowledge. A proverb among my people again says, if you have knowledge, share it with your friend. That's exactly what you have been doing, and I hope Prof will continue with this engagement and interface with our colleagues, so that ultimately what we produce will appeal to a much wider audience. And Prof, you asked about the audience. Our initial thought was let's write something that can generate some debate, both in academia and in the everyday public. So I hope we will achieve that balance, so that when our children who never saw Moi rule read the book, probably they will understand it. And if you are like me, where my children vow that they will never do history or read it, because they have seen me go through hell, what they call hell, because it's like I'm reading all through. They will probably have a chance to read the story of this country as embodied in the second, or the Moi was the second president of the second and the fourth, because we had Kenyatta, then we had Moi, we had Ochuka for 6 hours, and then we had Moi again. So thank you very much. Prof, I hand it over to you.
Ochuka was also our excellence. Yes, it is very, not only that, it's online. Giving the speech and talking about taking power, it's still there. Ochuka, yes, yeah, the one who passed on. Anyway, I think thank you, Ken, for that. I don't think after such a fruitful engagement over the period we've been here from 9 o'clock to now, there's one lesson that comes out very, very clearly. That is something to engage us, because you don't stay on when, in essence, there's nothing to engage us. It is exactly what we meant when we started this project, that we must start a new debate. And the debate is not business as usual, how Africa works, the legacy of late colonialism by Mamdanis and others, the wretched of the earth and all that, or how Europe had developed Africa. Let's not be accused of thinking about what others are saying about her. I mean, being accused of not having agency in terms of the way we do things. But at the same time, as we talk about African solutions to African problems, let's also look at the African problems that require African solutions. Because some problems are ours, that we make choices, and that's the interpretation we are having here. We had a choice to decide what direction our nation takes. Sit down and clearly come up with values that are going to guide us and all that, which is what some nations have done. Japan, they chose what they want to do with themselves after even American domination and so on. And many, many more nations we talk about, the Magna Cartas and all that we study, are people's serious efforts to define who they are and what path they are taking. So our effort here is to engage, to get the Kenyan public engaging. I was warned when we were having lunch that this might have a backlash on me as a Mount Kenya person, because you reignite the divide between the Itungatis, the patriots, and the loyalists. Because this is what this book is about, that we have become too much royalists rather than the patriots. Because the patriots lost the war. And that is why Mzee Odinga was angrily saying, not yet Uhuru. He was not, you cannot sit down and write a book that deep and without that, without basically reflecting on how your nation is like. So it's not very different from what the debate that Odinga ignited in terms of how we are moving. So we do really appreciate your input into the book, the insights and suggestions that have come from you. We promise we've seen, we've taken copious notes, and we have, for me, I treasure this particular copy because it has everything that you've said. I've used every blank space so that I don't lose the comments at any cost. This is going to guide our work forward. After this, we are literally we're not writing anymore. We're now just enriching what we have. The debate on the floor, which was very again from Peter, Rache, and Dominic. What came out is clearly that yes, we have a substance, we have a concept, but we need to tighten it, and we also need to give a story that has no bumps. It doesn't have a bumps on the road, because they make things very uncomfortable. And I think we'll spend the first good part defining two things. One, the Happy Valley, and two, the aristocracy, and how different it is from, is it a class? Do you mean, when would they say aristocracy, do we mean a class or do we mean the regime? So that when we're talking about the Moi state, what is it that we're talking about? So the clarity of concepts. And this is a first order question when you are dealing with conceptual issues that you are trying to ground. It's very different from when you have a concept that is very well defined and trying to apply it to a situation. That's very different. For example, the theory of the development in Meru. It is very easy to look at it because already discussed. You discuss it and then you say how it applies. But when you are coming up with a theory and you are applying it to what we already know, or what we are biased on, like we know Biwot might have killed Ahoko. That's what you are told. Or others are told that Biwot was, Ahoko was killed by other people and then dumped there because of love triangle or some problem. There are the issues there. How do you deal with fitting your theory into it? And some of the questions you were raising were about how successful we were in applying this new concept into situations that you already know very, very clearly. Because most of us here are very, very familiar with the history of the Moi era. So we'll do that, and then we have Kenyatta, the Kenyatta era. Before you even talk about the Moi aristocracy, you've got to get in details about the Kenyatta aristocracy. In the morning we are told about Gema. Where is the place of Gema in all this? Where is the story of the whole thing that Professor Dominic and myself were taken through as children at the age of 6, 7, and 8, because I took my oath at 6 years, and so on. I don't know. No, 6 years. I had almost 20, another 10 years to go before I become a real man in Kikuyu. And therefore, I had no responsibility. But what we're saying is that we need to get deep into the Kenyatta era and the legacy of that on the Moi. The issues of continuities and discontinuities come here. How is the continuities from Kenyatta and continuities to Moi? And what are the discontinuities in this case? So it's not about just saying that the coup helped Moi to change things. What was the template that was guiding his changing of things? That question will have to be addressed. The consolidation of the Moi aristocracy, the current generation, the Moi, was it a homogeneous thing, or was it was a discord, brought some discord? Who won and who lost in the construction of this state? And are these names that we are familiar with? So the rise and fall of certain people, and the fall and rise of others, as it were. Now the greatest challenge to Moi aristocracy comes from, the Kalenjin aristocracy comes from outside. The Kenyatta aristocracy didn't have that kind of a challenge because the British were comfortable with it and they were doing good business with it. So they didn't have a problem. They had a problem with Kenyatta's age because they would have loved him to live longer because they were comfortable. But here they are coming. We'll explore this idea about Moi as his own man and also as a man who had favors from other quarters, whether from God or from man. So Moi comes to power through either the hand of man or the hand of God, whichever theory you want to follow. But essentially, we have to explain this, how he gets to power. And finally, we are, in terms of this flow, we are talking about the challenges, the main challenge, which is the call for a regime change. Whether you call it democratization, you call it the push for pluralism, you call it for whoever, Kenyans wanted a regime change. And the regime change they wanted is the one from one that is despotic, one that is an authoritarian, to one that is very democratic. Not very different from the British challenge of their monarchy and the transformation of Britain to some democratic form. Not very different, but ours would take this unique form that it took. And then the response of the regime. How does it respond to this? And in its response, is it all violence? So there is violence on one hand, but there are also other mechanisms and approaches that are taken. And this have legacy on how we are behaving today. So the survival and coping strategies and mechanisms of the regime to its challenges. I agree with you, Peter, that we have to sit down as a team and rethink whether we want to end at 202 or we want to push this, even if it is by just adding one chapter that say something, so that, as Kurgat would say, we don't look like we are targeting Moi in his grave, which would look very vindictive because he can't defend himself. Why don't you target Ruto or target Uhuru because they are leaving? Why are you going for those who cannot defend themselves? We don't want to be accused of that. So we'll have to sit down. At the same time, we don't want to have a long book because Kenyans are not given to reading these huge volumes. They when they see them, they don't like them very much, so to say. So you can imagine what, Dominic, you've said, because you're the one who was reading us through this clarity of story, the story that we'll be telling. You can imagine how helpful this has been to us in many ways. And therefore, I can't do much but to thank you very, very much. To thank you for the comments, to thank you for availing your whole day to us as a team, and to thank you for also giving us just your reverence. You're not most of you are not ordinary people. I see we have our students here, but they also have something to do where they were. But for somebody like Peter P.L. Lumumba, who came straight from the airport to here, and Mary and others. The last time I was with Mary in a sitting, everybody was like genuflecting, just going on their knees to Madam Commissioner. And I was wondering whether this is the Mary I was with in New York, in Boston, and elsewhere. So just gracing this moment at the time that we are trying to build an indigenous setup, the Center for Presidential Studies, so that in the future we might attract a grant and ask Peter, can you read us in this? Because we are reading in this other one. Because that's how scholars live. We live by getting something done. So this is the platform we are creating. It is ours. We started it. I would have been selfish myself and kept it to my institution. There are certain projects we are doing alone. And tomorrow we'll have something on China. We have not invited everybody. So that's whatever. But there are certain projects where we feel we need to share. And this was one of them. So I want also to thank Ken, my partner in this, because of really working with us. It has not been easy. It has not been easy in many cases. And basically, Ken has been very, very kind to us. More so, leading on our behalf the team at the University of Nairobi. He's been the team leader, those sites, and coordinated events there. I've been the team leader on this side, and possibly the overall coordinator of the project. Ken has been such a wonderful partner. When I look at him, I see either Bruce Berman or Ronsdale, because they are very, very rare, partnership of this kind. Mary and the rest will do our best to get everybody included. The nature of the book, by virtue of the way we conceived, is co-authored, but you know how the World Bank does it. You acknowledge as a technical, the specific, not at the level of acknowledgement. There's a section called acknowledgement. No. You also indicate in the book that this is the technical committee that worked on this book, so that you are not, riding on other people's things, and appearing such a giant, yet you are riding on other people's, what you can call ideas. The ideas that have come from here must be collectively owned. But we also know we are doing this for our republic. We are doing this for our people. We are doing this for future generations that will read and see what their fathers and mothers, grandmothers thought about their own republic. Because without this, and so many autobiographies that are disconnected appearing on our shelves, just reading divided stories, we need one cohesive story that tells us where the first drop of rain started hitting us. And with that, therefore, I want to thank everyone, and I want us to prepare ourselves, the political style, to craft for ourselves, and I want to harmonize this. I know in politics we normally say "Wushia," but I want us to do the traditional way, which is basically let's craft for ourselves one. No, that's just the normal one. It makes me feel better. I do a lot of crafting in politics. No, there's one thing.
Just stand and bow so that we pray. Our Father and our God in heaven, when we started this meeting in the morning, we came before thy throne of mercy and asked for your leadership and guidance. Father, as your children, we come before thee to testify that this far you have led us. Thank you for the energy. Thank you for the wisdom. Thank you for all that we have done and said today. In our conversations, Heavenly Father, as mere mortal beings, there are things we said that are against your will. There are things we did that are against your will. We ask sincerely for you to forgive us, and if there are things that we said and did that are according to your will, we ask you to add into them the blessings of the Holy Spirit so that they come to see the light of day. At this moment, we just want to live for our homes, and how we ask in a very special way, Heavenly Father, that it dismisses with your blessings, but not from your presence. And all these mercies we ask in your precious name, and let everybody say, Amen.